Reading 73 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2, Quermir Dugley, April 28, 1945. On bringing the opposites together. In the last few commentaries on some of the work ideas we have been speaking about, ordinary decisions made on the basis of yes or no. In this connection, we brought in the idea of the law of the pendulum. The psychological pendulum swings from one side to the opposite side. I mentioned how Mr. O had remarked that we are conscious in the ordinary sense at the opposite swings of the psychological pendulum. We are not conscious of the intermediate stages. He said that the pendulum moves fastest at the middle point, and that with our slow hydrogens that subserve our ordinary so-called waking state of consciousness, which is always compared with a state of sleep in the work, we have not the quickness of inner perception, of consciousness, of the power of registering, of catching finer octaves of meaning that belong to the neighborhood of the middle parts of the pendulum. He added that in every situation that we are faced with, especially when identified with it, we do not catch the finer degrees of these situations, the finer meanings, and that if we could work with the speed of emotional perception, that is, with hydrogen 24, and still more so with hydrogen 12, a great wealth of new meaning and new insights would be the result. We would see far finer differences, quite different solutions to the problems with which we are confronted, and we could realize what immense distances of meaning really lie between what we usually regard as continuous. But as we are, our psychological life, our inner invisible life, is ordinarily controlled by hydrogen 48, and it is particularly the formatory part of the intellectual center that works with this slow hydrogen, this heavy petrol. As you know, the work teaches that in the formatory part of our thinking, our whole mental outlook is only capable of expressing itself in terms of yes or no. It is taught that by contrast, higher centers work in terms of yes and no. This means that our ordinary thinking that we trust so much and follow so much is not really thinking. It works only with the exclusion of one side and the affirmation of the other opposite side, or vice versa. For this reason, the whole world of men and women, classes and nations, is divided into opposite camps, people on one side or the other side. So too, we plague one another all day long with questions such as, do you believe this or not? Do you like this or not? Are you a this or a that? There is a rather overused phrase in the work to the effect that the formatory part of the mind is third force blind. This means it is always swinging between these opposites, this yes or no, and has no neutralizing force, no yes and no. No harmonizing force, which brings the opposites together into a combination, one that we cannot understand ordinarily. This union of the opposites, this reconciling force, is a third thing, a third force connecting both opposites and yet different from either. Let us recall one of the definitions of third force, which lies between the two opposite and mutually destructive forces called active and passive. It is defined as the relating force. It is a force which partakes of both sides of any question and brings them into a new relation, into a synthesis, and yet is neither of them. I called it in the last paper X, something unknown to us as we are at our level of understanding. I asked you if you did not get tired after being a long time in this work and following the path of self-observation, of making some sudden decisions which are practically always overwhelmed by an opposite result from what you expected. We make some aim in one swing of the pendulum and cannot keep it, or are surprised to notice that it rouses the opposite side. Naturally, because an aim made from one side of the swing of the pendulum is made without calculation of second force, the force of resistance to it. Yet, at first, we must make aim of this kind because we have to realize that we cannot do in the ordinary violent sense. This introduces us gradually to the idea of what it means that we cannot do in the greatest sense, namely that we must have help. Now, help is always coming to us from the higher centers, which are fully developed and are always working in us, always speaking to us. In fact, always telling us what to do, and I think here I do not exaggerate. But we cannot understand this language, this help, because it is in terms of yes and no, in terms of this X, this middle solution. Our formatory part especially cannot possibly hear the messages from higher centers, because it is always dividing everything up into two contradictory statements, into yes or no, into two opposites which appear to be irreconcilable. But there is a point in the swing of the pendulum, although it is here going fastest, a point right in the middle of the two sides of this swing where utterly new meaning enters. Although we cannot hope to be sufficiently awake, sufficiently alert internally, to hear, to understand, to catch and to register what happens at this point, we can gradually dissuade ourselves from following the suggested solutions that arise when we are at one full swing or the other. I mean, we begin to distrust the range of thoughts and feelings belonging to these extreme swings, these opposites, in which we are usually conscious in the ordinary second state of consciousness. We begin to dislike this coarse division, this coarse language, these coarse solutions, in fact, these violent solutions to our problems. We begin to know that they are useless and that some far finer adjustments are necessary. Now, if you take an ordinary person who is very opinionated, you will agree with me that he will always take one side or the other of a question of opinions. Talking many years ago of the union of opposites, Mr. O once said, "We must learn to argue from opposite viewpoints." An opinionated man, and of course this means ourselves, often begins by saying, "I always think, I always say," and so on. Now, if our inner psychological state rests on a basis of this kind, we cannot do this work. The psychological groundwork is all wrong. Let us take pictures of ourselves. You know very well a woman, a man, with strong pictures of herself or himself, after a little conversation. They have a certain idea of themselves, open or concealed. They have certain opinions. They take such and such viewpoints, but they do not necessarily realize this. Now, the object of the work on its practical side is to let a ray of light into the inner darkness of ourselves, this not perceived side. Light means consciousness. We have a dark side of ourselves, a side of darkness that we do not see. In regard to pictures of ourselves, what is the result of light? The result is the seeing of a part of the darkness and bringing it into consciousness. This is an extension of consciousness, an increase of consciousness. You have often heard that the work is to increase consciousness, first of ourselves, then of other people, because that is the only possible order. A man, through self-observation, increases the consciousness of himself. He no longer lives only in the front garden, but begins to walk around the house, and so perform a circle. This inclusion in consciousness of what he did not know, as in the case of seeing what we are instead of living in pictures, in imaginary eye, brings together opposites. The effect of light falling on pictures of ourselves is therefore to change the whole feeling, the whole idea of ourselves. False personality, imaginary I, pictures, and many other things keep us on one side of ourselves. We do not see, we do not know, and certainly do not acknowledge the other side. So we live in a wrong relation to ourselves, and, as was said, the work cannot start from this basis. It cannot start from a one-sidedness. Let us think about this dark side into which light must gradually penetrate. We can begin with the idea of different kinds of people according to the development of centers in them. In the language of the work, a number one man is a man whose center of gravity psychologically is in his instinctive moving center. A number two man is in the emotional center. A number three man is in the intellectual center. Now, there are 6 formulations for men and women from this angle. A person may be 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 3, 3, 1, 2, or 3, 2, 1. This means that a man whose formulation, as regards centers, is 1, 2, 3, is first of all number 1, that is, in instincts and movements, and more rarely in 2, that is, in emotional perception, and still more rarely in 3, that is, in intellectual thoughts. He is therefore an unbalanced man, a one-sided man. What then is the dark side of him in this respect? The dark side is formed by the undeveloped and so not yet properly conscious sides that lie in 2 and 3, that is, in emotional life and in intellectual life. And so with the rest of the formulations. In every case, the undeveloped functions lying in the dark side may take many undesirable automatic manifestations. We can conceive that one of the many forms of swing of the pendulum in a man may be a swing sometimes between the more developed side of him, lying in the light, and the less developed side lying in what is dark to him. His task, then, is to observe and notice and bring into the light of his own consciousness of himself, by private insight, this undeveloped dark side, and so educate it. This will result in an inner growth, an inner development of the person. It is for this reason that I said the dark side, into which the work tells us that we must send a ray of light, can be both good and bad. Pictures are always bad, but undeveloped functions are only bad if left in the dark. If brought forward by constant observation and reflection, and here, of course, the complacent man is incapable of shifting his basis, they begin to add to the life, to increase meaning and interest, and give new impressions. But the feeling of oneself will change. A one-sided, one-center man feels himself in a particular way. If his other centers begin to come forward, then naturally he will lose his former feeling of himself. And many dislike this gradual transformation and refuse it and think it an evil thing. But the devil is always the dark side, what we are ignorant of. Some people, for example, think it wicked to read novels, and so on, in endless ways. I believe there are still sects that think it wicked to learn anything, that must furnish them with a special extra-sized devil. That must furnish them with a special extra-sized devil. They are really devil worshippers without knowing it. That is, worshippers of ignorance, of darkness, of everything strict and narrow and unmerciful. You will remember that a great deal was said about the Pharisees in the Gospels, that is, this narrow thing in ourselves. Remember that everything said in the Gospels is psychological and applies here and now to ourselves. Have you studied your own Pharisee? Now we can come in this commentary to another aspect of this dark side, the side lying beyond our small range of consciousness. I will begin by saying that in the example of having pictures of ourselves that are quite different from what we are, what contradicts these forms of imagination, of vanity, of pictures of ourselves, is in darkness. We are ignorant of it. The difficulty here is that we do not even see the pictures. People can have a picture of having no picture. We do not think we have any pictures, but when you are upset or unpraised, it is as well to look at some picture at work in you. This may help it to be observed. Then a very interesting process of work on oneself begins. From first seeing the picture and then observing what contradicts it. This is a harmonizing process, a bringing together of opposites, both lying in darkness and acting on us beyond our control, as everything does that is not standing in recognition, in acceptance, in the light of consciousness. This drawing together of opposite things, this making outer and inner the same, this going against one-sidedness, which prevents the action of the mechanical pendulum and places consciousness increasingly towards the center, the middle, where yes and no exist, strengthens the whole being. As I said, nothing can grow save through this process, which destroys all self-conceit and makes you feel another kind of person. You then, as it were, can walk round the whole of your house, front and back, and then things can begin. Why? Because you can begin to understand the language of yes and no, in which higher centers speak to us, as it were, in the language of parables. I will add briefly that it is only in higher divisions of centers that all such work is possible. The lowest divisions, as formatory part, can only work in yes or no. And you can only get into higher divisions of centers through valuation of the work. These higher parts gradually pass towards higher centers. I will now quote some of the sayings of Christ found in the Gospels and in some of the recent discoveries of papyruses, referring to making inner and outer the same. In the Sermon on the Mount given in Matthew, Christ says, "If therefore thou art offering thy gift at the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Agree with thine adversary quickly, whiles thou art with him in the way, lest haply the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison." Matthew 5. Then there are Christ's words to the Pharisees, when a certain Pharisee, quote, marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. End quote. Quote, "The Lord said unto him, Now do ye Pharisees cleanse the outside of the cup and of the platter, but your inward part is full of extortion and wickedness. Ye foolish ones, did not he that made the outside make the inside also? Howbeit, give for alms those things which are within, and behold, all things are clean unto you." Luke 11. Among the sayings of Christ not included in the Gospels are the following. Quote, "When the Lord was asked by a certain man, when should his kingdom come? He saith unto him, When two shall be one, and the without as the within, and the male with the female, neither male nor female." Example, active and passive are replaced by third force. And again, quote, "If ye make not the below into the above, and the above into the below, the right into the left, and the left into the right, the before into the behind, and the behind into the before, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of God." End quote.